Hello, my name is Lavar. Black, Muslim, and French, assimilation and French identity. How did the colonization of Africa by France affect experiences of people of African origin? And how does the colonial mindset still affect these people in France today? Well, why France? Well, similar to the US, France is a multicultural country. However, it treats issues of race and religion differently than the US, therefore making it interesting to look into. Also, France highlights many 21st century issues that are not going away. Immigration is increasing in Europe. At the same time, there's a rise in nationalism, xenophobia, and Islamophobia. In France, because it has so much power and influence in the EU, it may serve as a model. Although French colonialism has mostly ended in the 21st century, the idea of assimilation is still present in French laws and society. The lasting legacy of assimilation negatively affects African migrants and people of African descent the most because of its narrow views on what it means to be a French citizen. Until France changes its laws and celebrates its citizens' diverse racial, ethnic, and cultural backgrounds, people of African descent, and especially African migrants, will struggle to be seen as French. The first part of my paper is about colonization in Africa. France was one of the largest colonizers in Africa. And what makes French colonization different from other colonial powers is how their colonial empire covered both North and Sub-Saharan Africa and took in various different religions, cultures, and skin color. The assimilation of African people into French culture from the colonial period also carried on today as well. Assimilation was the idea that people of the culture that were being colonized were a tabula rasa, or a blank slate of people who did not have their own histories and cultures. Due to France's colonial values of assimilation, they sought to put certain Africans into more power over other Africans. This created French Evols, which basically meant elite Africans. These Evols held higher status than most of their companions and gained more rights, like being able to obtain higher education in France itself. France saw the people of their colonies as conquerable, both physically and culturally, and privileged very few Black Frenchmen who were willing to fully assimilate into French culture. Decolonization left many problems in its wake. Most of the modern problems we see in Africa, like immigration, stem from decolonization. War, resources, ethnic issues, and climate change became the driving factor to why so many people from African countries migrate to European countries like France. Overall, French colonization of North and Sub-Saharan Africa left overwhelmingly negative impacts on the nations that exist in the continent today. Colonization did not only hurt countries in Africa, it affects modern French society as well. One of the ways we see this is through racialization in everyday life in France. From policing to housing to hiring, racialization is a huge issue in France today. The media's portrayal of race and racism do not help the situation. For example, the French media highlights and gives airtime to politicians like Eric Zemmour, who claim that African migrants, quote, don't belong here. They are thieves, they are murderers, they are rapists, that's all they are. They should be sent back. They shouldn't even come. Because of racialization, xenophobic statements like this hurt all Black people living in France. France's ban on collecting racial demographics makes it so the issue of racism is almost completely ignored because there's no way to know who it affects. France completely banned the collection of racial demographic data in 1978. There are many theories why France did not collect demographic data, but one plausible theory is that France banned the collection of this data after the Algerian War, refusing to count how many people immigrated from the war. No matter what the reason, banning demographics as a whole completely alienates anyone who is not considered French by French society. Islamophobia is also a huge issue in France since its colonial rule of North Africa. There are an estimated 6 million Muslims living in France today, which is about 9% of France's total population. It's also estimated that immigrants make up about 12% of the French population, with a majority coming from North Africa and the Middle East. French society shows a huge amount of hypocrisy when addressing people outside of Maghreb origin as not French. For example, Aisha, a mother who grew up outside of Paris, was accused of being part of an Algerian extremist group, the Islamic Front, despite being of Moroccan descent. In 2019, a study revealed that 42% of French Muslims felt like they experienced discrimination based on their faith, with the number rising to 60% for Muslim women wearing a headscarf. These feelings of discrimination are validated by actual data and studies. In a 2015 study by Montaigne Institute compared resumes of French-sounding names and Islamic-sounding names and found that the Catholic-sounding names were more likely to be hired than the Muslim-sounding names. In 2021, under President Emmanuel Macron, new laws known as the Anti-Separatism Laws were passed. These new laws expanded a ban on headscarves to private businesses that work with the public sector and gave local authorities the ability to oppose organizations like mosques or nonprofits that do not support France's Republican principles. Immigrants of white European origin aren't asked to stop practicing their culture and to stop wearing things that tie to their culture. Many French people of Maghrebian origin are often not considered French, despite them having stronger ties to France than other people of white European origin. Present-day laws that exclude Muslims from everyday life, like the ban on hijabs, only make matters worse by isolating a large part of society and communities. Hiba, a spokesperson for Muslims in France, says, "We are told we don't integrate, but we are gradually being pushed outside of the public life completely." France is not making efforts to be more welcoming to other cultures. In fact, it's going backwards. This can be seen clearly in France's 2022 election. Emmanuel Macron, who's the most liberal major candidate in the French elections, signed off the anti-separatism laws that heavily discriminated against Muslims. Islamophobia and xenophobia are even more prevalent in other French Republicans. Valérie Pécresse, who is one of the leaders of Les Republicans Party, has spread misinformed and potentially dangerous ideas about race and migrants in her political speeches. In a speech on February 13, 2022, in front of 7,000 people in Paris, Pécresse discussed the Great Replacement, a conspiracy theory that migrants will take over the native population of France. Right-wing politicians in France like Eric Zemmour and Marine Le Pen contribute to these issues and show blatant racism and gaining traction in France. In many ways, France is moving backwards in terms of being a more open society. However, there are still signs of hope. Marine Le Pen and Eric Zemmour didn't win the election. Some French academics are also pushing for France to become more cosmopolitan. This would be more inclusive because in a cosmopolitan society, cultures are not stigmatized. Although France seems to be holding on to the similarist values, if it begins to acknowledge and address racialization and Islamophobia in everyday life, it can become a more inclusive society. Thank you for being.